Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Startup of the Year podcast. I'm Frank Gruber, the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, also the co-founder of Established Ventures and the team behind the Startup of the Year community and this podcast. On this episode, I'm talking to Dr. Ximena Hartsock, the co-founder of Phone2Action, the world's leading technology company for civic participation and stakeholder engagement. The platform has empowered millions of advocates to make over 40 million connections with elected officials. Wow. That's amazing. She's passionate about education and about empowering people to take action to make the world a better place. Who can argue with that? That's amazing. And she's also a member of the board of directors of Consumer Technology Association, which produces I think it's the largest gathering in North America around tech. It's the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, and she's also been named by Forbes as a list of women crushing it in technology. So as you can see, she's truly amazing, quite the innovator, and working on changing the world. So when I got to interview her at our summit in the fall of 2020, she was still working on Phone2Action and for 8 years now or so, and she announced that she had just left recently. So we caught her before she left Phone2Action, and that's the interview we're going to play here shortly. We're super excited, though, to hear about her new company, her new pursuits, as she's going to be launching a new technology venture at some point here in the near future. So look forward to that as she announces those details when they become available. Before we get started with the interview, though, I wanted to jump in and have some words of advice from our team. I'd like to hear from Rich Malloy, the VP of Engagement at Established and part of Established Ventures, who has also got some tips for startup founders in a segment we call the VC Minute.
Let's talk about talking about exits. And yes, you heard that right. I've started asking founders, where do you see your company in 5 years? And the answer I hate to hear is, we'll have an exit by then. Okay, hold on. You and I both know that I have a fiscal responsibility to my investors to return multiples of their capital. And I do this by having liquidity events from my investments. But if you think that telling me you're going to sell the business in 5 years is what I want to hear, you've got it wrong. And it actually throws up two major red flags. First, entrepreneurship is hard. Really, really hard. If you are only in this for the money, then you're not going to have the grit to push through all the unforeseen, gut-wrenching, keep you up at night problems that will come your way. There are dozens of studies that show that money is not a prime motivator. And if you're only in this for the money, then you don't have enough grit and motivation to get through the hardships. Second, while it's true that I am looking for exits, what I'm actually looking for are return the fund exits and then some. I'm not looking for a few companies to return 2 to 3x. I'm looking for one company to return the whole fund. Here's some quick math. If I have a $20 million fund and I own 2% of your company on a fully diluted basis at exit, that exit needs to be $1 billion to return $20 million. That's the kind of exit I'm looking for. Actually, I'm looking for more than that, but we can geek out on fund economics later. Are you going to get to $1 billion in 5 years if getting an exit is your primary motivation? Hell no. You're going to take the first $50 million private equity offer that comes your way because you'll get a few $1 million out of it, which will be amazing for you, and I'll be so incredibly happy for you. I just don't want to invest in that. I want to back founders that want to change the world, not cash their chips in. That's all for the VC Minute. Back to you, Frank.
Thanks, Rich. Great tips on talking about exits and a little bit of fund economics as well. Great stuff, as always. Thank you. Many of you know that we have a long tradition of heading down to Austin, Texas in early March for South by Southwest. And I wanted to quickly let you know that we've got something brewing again this year in mid-March. Though we won't be heading down to Austin, it will be online again this year, as the festival itself is as well. So if you're interested in learning more, you want to get involved, please visit est.us/SXSW21. Again, it's est.us/XSSW21. We've got March 15th and 16th. We've got some events focused on different types of innovators, investors, startups. Should be a lot of fun. So check those out, and hopefully you can join us. Aside from our March events, I also wanted to take a moment to invite all of our listeners to get involved in our program by visiting establish.us/programs, establish.us/programs. If you go there and you sign up, you'll be the first to be notified of our various startup opportunities from across the various organizations we work with in a number of different ecosystems around the country. So lots of great stuff happening, and love to have you involved in anything that we can do to help you. So, oh, and one other thing, actually, if you're on an iOS device right now, and soon I think Android as well, we're actually spending a lot of time over on the Clubhouse app. It's all the rage these days. It's the audio-only app that allows you to create interesting conversations and interactions with people. And so we've been doing some office hours over there. We've been doing some other spotlights around different communities. And we're going to be doing some things, or some rooms around there during South by Southwest festivities. So be sure to follow me at Frank Gruber, as well as at Jen Consavo and at John Guidos. We're going to be doing a number of Clubhouse things in the future, and hope that you can join us. We'll be putting them in our newsletter as well, so you can subscribe to our newsletter to learn more. est.us is where you can get there. So now we're going to listen to our conversation with Dr. Ximena Hartsock, who is pretty awesome, and I'm excited that she was able to join us. So let's listen in to our discussion at the Start of the Year Summit in the fall of 2020. Welcome, Ximena. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for that introduction. And you definitely can call me X. You don't have to.
Dr. X. That's what we're going to call you now.
Just X.
That's such a cool. I wish I had that nickname. That's amazing. All right, so Dr. X, tell us a little bit more about your background. You came from a really interesting. You have got a really interesting background. You were a teacher, a principal. You were part of. You used to lead up the Parks and Rec in Washington D.C. How did that get you into wanting to then kind of slightly pivot, right, to start a startup with Phone2Action?
Yeah, so I actually am an immigrant too. I came from Chile, and before doing all of those jobs, I actually did other jobs immigrants do. I was a nanny, I was a bartender, I was a housekeeper. I did all of that, and so I think every job really prepares us, to do whatever we do next. And I think I got from those early on jobs, all of the attention to detail, to the little things that matter. Maybe a lot of us, sometimes take for granted, but the people do those jobs, they make a big difference. And then later on, working for government, what I learned there is that you can't operate any government strategy without talking to people, without engaging with the community. When I was a principal, our school, when I went in, had a lot of issues, and most of those issues were resolved when we started working with the community, the teachers and the parents and our neighbors. And later on, working in parks, we learn a lot that, every park that you build, if you don't ask the neighbors around the community how you're spending that money, the timelines and everything, you eventually will pay for that. So I think the best, perhaps, opportunity job-wise was later on after I stopped working for the mayor and working in government. I joined the organization, one of the organizations that had done tremendous work here in education reform in the U.S., and I was National Director of Mobilization and Outreach. And it was there where I had a really eye-opening experience when I learned that people did not necessarily know how to contact their lawmakers. Sometimes they didn't even know who they were. And in talking to parents and teachers across the way, because I used to travel across the country during those years, I will ask a parent, did you tell your lawmaker about that issue your child had in school? Or I will ask a lawmaker, have you talked to your parents in the community before voting on this issue? And the answer was no. And so I think I just was very lucky to have different experiences along the way that helped me to get, kind of prepared for the moment where I thought, we should have an app for that. And, the app didn't exist, and there it was, Phone2Action was born.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that there wasn't really an easy feedback loop for connecting, what you're thinking or seeing with the folks that you elected. That's pretty, seems like a basic thing, but amazing that you guys found that niche and were able to create it. So take us back to maybe how they, you met your co-founder, right? So your co-founder, I'd known for a little while because of back when we were doing Tech Cocktail and Tech Co events back in Chicago. I met him. He was actually part of the one of our events early on, I think in Chicago and Champaign, Illinois, I think even, and with a previous startup called 5 Degrees, and he was part of the startup program. So he's actually technically part of our alumni here with Start of the Year. But how did you meet Jeb, your co-founder, and how did that turn into, we're now going to create this company?
So I had the idea of Phone2Action between 2011 and 2012. Like I said, I was traveling across the country, advocating on education reform issues and talking to parents and teachers on the ground. And I thought, this doesn't scale. I can't fly people from Miami to Tallahassee or from the parts of Michigan to Detroit or to Lansing, where the conversations were. It's kind of funny, like most of the capitals in the country are in these all very difficult places to get to.
Hard to get to, right?
So I thought this doesn't scale. And at the time, I remember that when I was a school principal in DC, the first person that bought the iPhone was a substitute teacher that didn't make a lot of money. And when people start telling me, when I would tell people, hey, I think we should have an application to connect people with their lawmakers, something easy on a phone, people will say to me, no, nobody's going to have that because poor people don't have smartphones. The penetration was really low in 2012. But I remember that substitute teacher. So I thought, maybe today is low. Tomorrow is going to be a very deep penetration. So I'm going to bet on technology that works really well on the phone. And so very quickly from the beginning, I thought this application, whatever it is, people need to be able to use it on a computer, on an iPad, or on a phone of any kind. And it was like that I started really having a closer and closer idea to something I wanted to build. But I didn't want to build it right away as a company. I was building it just to solve my problem in my job. But I started going to meetups. I started going everywhere. I lived in Sacramento at the time, so I would travel to San Francisco. And my husband at the time was my boyfriend. He had a lot of friends in technology. I was talking to them. And, I was just talking to a lot of people. And one day I went into a happy hour and I told a friend I was really frustrated. And she said, my husband actually works in technology and he happens to be in town today. And, that's how I met Jeff, because my friend was his wife. So it was very serendipitous because I had never met him. I didn't know anything about, technology before that. And I had already been talking to a lot of other people. So I was already kind of like on a path to build a company, but meeting Jeff and then later Patrick, who actually was our technical co-founder, helped us to put it all together much quickly.
That's great. So for those that aren't familiar with Phone2Action, and you've talked a little bit about it, but can you kind of share like the simpleton version of how it works and what the product, kind of walk us through that, what that user experience might look like for a use case of somebody that want to connect?
You may have not heard of Phone2Action, but you certainly have heard of the people that use Phone2Action. So if you were, part of if you heard Ariana Grande or Billie Eilish or Taylor Swift talk about elections during the election, to they get out the vote, they were using our technology to encourage people to register to vote and to look up candidates and polling locations. If you ever seen all the activations of J.Lo or Jay-Z or Beyonce or the Grammys around music, around justice reform or anything like that, they also use Phone2Action to connect people with their lawmakers about some of these legislative issues. So it's widely used. There are, near 1,000 organizations in the US that use it. Many celebrities, Europe, California, Australia, and Canada also use Phone2Action. As in a very easy way, you can click on a link and then you're matched with your lawmaker and you can send them an email or make a phone call or send them a tweet and connect with them and tell them, you are my representative. I elected you to fight for issues that I care about. This is how I feel about this policy. So during COVID, it was very, very highly used by millions of people to activate. And now during the election, about 10 million people use Phone2Action to register to vote and related activities.
Wow, 10 million?
10 million.
Wow, that's amazing. And, this year in general has just been, it's like one thing after another. And there's a lot of, I'm assuming there's a lot of grassroots movements that are happening because of it, right? So you've got things like, the civil unrest that we saw earlier this year, the pandemic, the election. So you guys put out a report about advocacy, and I wanted to talk about it. It's called the State of Advocacy. And can you share a little bit more about what you found in that report or what you covered in that report?
Yes, State of Advocacy was a data driven report, purely quantitative, that analyzed the way that people were using our technology this year compared to the years prior. And what we saw, it was a tremendous increase in activations, especially between March 13, which was the declaration of emergency of COVID, and the late May. What we saw is that people will participate, several times more, but also people will share whatever they were taking action on social media. So we saw a 7,000% increase in people coming into Phone2Action tools. And Phone2Action tools are available through the UNICEF, through Habitat for Humanity, through Patagonia, through all of these organizations that use Phone2Action. And they will come in and take action about COVID relief or a frontliner support, etc. And so what we saw, there are several things that are interesting. One of them is women activated in 140. It was a 140% increase of women taking action. It was over 110% increase for males. So both men and women took more action than before. But women really went above and beyond. We also saw all of the groups, from very young people to people over 80, taking action. In fact, there are campaigns on Twitter where we saw 10% of tweets were by new advocates over 65 years of age. Gen Xers came out dramatically to take action, and we believe in a lot of cases, for example, the Professional Beauty Association, that is the association that represents the beauty salons, barber shops, etc. They told that they believe it's because most of the owners of these salons are Gen Xers. But we saw that across the board. But what's very interesting, March 13 was the declaration of emergency. March 21st was a Saturday. We saw it was just hundreds of thousands of people taking action in hours. That week, millions of people took action on COVID relief. COVID relief, the first one passed on March 26th. And we saw the activity keep going. And then on May 25th, was George Floyd's killing. And then that weekend, the weekend after George Floyd, we saw our election tools skyrocketing. So what COVID did is get people really, really motivated to take action around advocacy. And then the civil unrest around George Floyd, what it did, it was motivate people to get out and vote.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, what a unique year for you guys to be able to track all this data. And I mean, 400% increase in women, 140% in men is still, any year is phenomenal, but that's just off the charts this year. And obviously, it probably was really interesting for you to see all these different things. And we're not done with 2020 yet. So hopefully,
that's right.
Hopefully, you can keep tracking, but hopefully there's nothing major like that as it continues here. So let's talk about, is this a U.S. movement, or do you guys see this as both U.S. and just a global rise in advocacy everywhere?
It's global. That is, since October in 2019, we are seeing a revolution across the globe of people really taking on their causes very personally and coming, if it's not to the streets, on social media, and if it's not in either one of those, at home, really thinking and talking to the family members about the issues they care about. Public policy has become mainstream. Terms like trade and NAFTA and NATO and all of these now are conversations that you have in a cocktail party, and people of all backgrounds are familiar with these types of conversations, and it is because one, information access, but also because of technology. And for you, the work that you've been doing, Frank, and the rest of all the listeners, we people in technology have played a critical role during the past years, and you can see especially in the US this year, but across the globe in 2019 there were several countries engaging in, they had civil unrest, and all of them were using 90% of the time the organizing was done through messenger apps, and the rest of the time it was a combination of social media and something else.
Right.
So apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, and here in the US, Signal especially, have been dramatically used. So yes, it is a worldwide effort.
Interesting. I mean, it's really interesting. And obviously, you saw that even in the election here with crazy turnout, right, for the election this year. The numbers of both candidates getting more votes than ever before. I mean, they both records as the most voted up.
141 million counting voted this election, more than ever before, and 100 million voted early. And in a big part because of the vote early and vote early day movement, that it was a digital movement where for 4 months people were encouraging others to mail. And if you look at Ariana Grande's and a lot of the organizations like Headcount, what they pushed, it was for people to tell 3 more people to vote. It was the tripling campaign, and all of that worked, but most of that was digital. And this is where we should, technology, people in technology, very proud of the role that we played in that, because especially during a pandemic, the numbers are incredibly impressive.
Definitely. And that whole early voting thing, I mean, I didn't realize even that you could do that early voting thing until this year, right? This is the first year. And I think it was that education, and everyone kind of got that education. And now it's actually the election day is the final day that you can vote.
Yes.
Or even maybe you mail in your vote, I guess you could say. And we were learning now that the counting can go on for a long time as well. So it's a process. It's not just one election day. And I think that's interesting that it took foot with, things like Phone2Action, sharing that message and getting it out there. I definitely, tuned into a lot of different musical events that were powered by Headcount or some of these other groups that you mentioned. Really great. Okay, so let's move along here. So can you maybe let's actually rewind a little bit, go back to your startup journey and talk a little bit more about what happened. You started this company in 2012. I wanted to hear how you guys connected and then got this company, get this product off the ground, and then you found your first customer. And I don't actually know if you raised funding or how that all went. So can you share a little bit more about the background there?
Yeah, so I was working at the time for this organization. Jeb was working, like you said, at 5 Degrees in Chicago. And Patrick, our technical co-founder, was in Kansas City. He was 19 years old at the time. And so, we were all like, it's 8 years ago. So it's interesting how time flies. But so I had the idea. It was a very much hands-on sort of perspective, what I had. But because of the jobs that I had before, I had a lot of experience with logistics, and I had, been in construction. That makes you think a lot about the processes that go into building something. And so, the first thing that we thought is that we have to move to an area where the customers are. So everybody moved to DC. And we actually got a space. We rented a space first at 1776, and then we rented a space at WeWork because we didn't really have, a lot of, we were just starting. for the first 8 months, we didn't draw any salaries. And, the first prototype that we built it in the beginning of 2013. Something, more serious and better, the platform was in 2014 when we launched Phone2Action 1.0. But all 2013, we sold the prototype as it was without a back end, and Consumer Technology Association signed a contract with us because they wanted to give us the opportunity because they knew I was an immigrant. And so I am going to be forever grateful of them because of giving us that opportunity. And then later on, also, Kansas City gave us a small $24,000 check to, kind of do something with that for the prototype or whatever. And with that money, we did all the operational portion of domain, not the first domain, because the first domain I bought it from a bar at $9. But, nice. All of the other stuff that you need, softwares and whatever. And then in 2014, we got some seed funding from Dundee in Omaha, Nebraska. It was $600,000. That money was incredibly helpful. And Beth, especially, Mark, these people were good people. They believed in us when really this industry was just starting because it was nothing like us anywhere. Now today you see other companies like Quorum, Fiscal Note, etc. But at the time it was just us. And so they trusted us. And then in 2016, we closed a $5.1 million Series A round with different partners. And, you have the typical, we had the Pennsylvania Fox, Osage, and, Dundee run. But I did a pitch at a conference in just like this one at Stanford, and it was a Latino conference, actually. And one of the attendees stayed in touch with me, and he gave us a check too. So nice. It was a combination for the Series A. And then last year in 2019, we closed a growth round with a private equity firm called Frontier, which is in North Carolina. And that round bought the stock and of the employees and their equity, and acquired the stock of all of the investors, and rewarded them for.
Oh, nice! You guys had a nice exit. I mean, I didn't hear about that. That's congratulations. It's amazing.
We kept 20% of our stock in the company, just Jeb and I, but the rest of the stock was purchased. Yeah. And now with them, we're still with them, still working in the company, and now we just acquired another company called GovPredict, and the acquisitions continue as part of building, an ecosystem for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Let's talk about that. So that was a YC-backed company, GovPredict, and it was just like a week or so ago, or a little bit longer. Can you share a little bit more about that acquisition and kind of the strategy of what you're looking to do with other startups?
Yeah, so one of the differences between getting acquired by, anybody or getting acquired by a private equity growth fund is that in the latter, you as a founder have the opportunity to, one, remain with the company, which sometimes you can do too with other acquisitions. But the idea of those types of transactions is for the current company to continue growing and to build, improve the company, grow it, scale it, expand it, sometimes abroad or in tools. And that expansion can look different in different ways. So it can look like investments in building more tools or partnerships, which can be acquisitions with technologies that are compatible, that expand the capabilities of the original purchase. So in this case, Phone2Action is a civic engagement technology for people to connect with their officials. And we have some tools for government affairs officials, but GovPredict has very has focused on government affairs tools. So if you are a head of a campaign or a head of government affairs at an association, you're more likely to use GovPredict tools first, because they will tell you information about the lawmakers, about bill tracking, about stakeholder engagement, everything related to the lawmaker. One Phone2Action will give you tools for you to mobilize people to talk to these lawmakers. So when you pair the two, you really have something very powerful, because you have the opportunity to engage people to connect with the lawmakers and create movements. And then you can see how the lawmakers are voting, perhaps influenced by these constituents. And, now our clients have access to both the intelligence about bill tracking and the information on the lawmakers, and at the same time, the ability to mobilize people to influence these lawmakers.
Makes sense. Sounds like it was the right fit too. I mean, a lot of times we talk about when you raise funding or look at like they were basically buying out the current investors and keeping you guys on board. Seems like it was a good fit for you guys to be able to grow with the trajectory. I mean, the opposite of that would have been just to kind of continue to be on that treadmill of raising more. From the more standard venture funds. So, did you find that? How did that all come together? I mean, was it you were looking for PE, or was it something that just kind of happened?
So, it's interesting that actually these are very good questions, Frank, because most times people don't ask you this. And so this is how, when you are an entrepreneur, at least in my experience, I didn't know a lot of this. And you kind of discover, and neither do you. Like, we kind of discover all of these opportunities along the way. Private equity has a little bit of a bad reputation. Right. And, you see a lot of private equity firms now kind of pivoting into be called growth funds, because they want to, make people not to notice that they are not buying just to buy, but they're actually buying because they believe in the product and they want to grow it. So in the case of this private equity firm in North Carolina, that's what they are. They're a growth fund. And so with that, they buy the stock. They buy, in the case of ours, it was 80% of mine, 80% of Jeb's. And then they assign, they give you other resources. So coaches and people that support, your leader, your management team with more experience. So almost every single manager at Phone2Action has a coach that came from this growth fund. And, they don't stay too much in their way, but they kind of generally guide you. And you as a founder, you can decide after, with conversations with them, how long do you want to stay in that situation? Well, in an acquisition, it's a little bit more cut and roll, Right. You can leave tomorrow, or we'll do a transition. It will be 3 months, 4 months. In a growth fund, is more of a conversation. Because the idea is to keep growing the company and to be something bigger. So we always were. I mean, especially probably me, because I'm a woman of color, as you can see, I have an accent, all of that stuff, and this was my baby. It was my idea. You want to put it in the hands of the right people. We all want to exit, and the venture capitalists want to exit. And, that's kind of like you have a startup, exiting is glorified. So we, all of those sentiments and emotions, we were feeling those too. Right. But the discovery of which way to go, it was, being more educated along the way. When we start getting traction, we start getting a lot of people will email us or through LinkedIn with interest about the company, and that's how you start kind of getting more educated about the different offerings. And so far, we're happy with the decision that we made. And there is a lot more opportunity with founders. I mean, you stay, you grow a company, and then you can go and do something else and right. and start another company. And I have a lot of ideas for the future. So I'm very proud of what we built at Phone2Action, but eventually, you just don't know the future, how it's gonna look like for anything. And there's just a lot of technology out there that needs to be adjusted, that we can buy, that we can attach to Phone2Action, or we can pivot certain things. So the core Phone2Action remains exactly the same as it was envisioned in 2012. Nothing has changed is all scaling volume. But in terms of the first visualization that we did with Patrick from the floor at 1776 in 2013, and the ideas, the napkin that I drew in 2012 is exactly the same. We have not even changed the UI in the platform.
Wow, that's pretty phenomenal. It has to feel pretty good. It's quite the journey over the last 8 years and growing it. And it sounds like it's on a good trajectory now, and to kind of continue to grow, and with the right funds, and obviously you guys still on board. Can you share, you shared a little bit there, we're almost out of time here, but I wanted to find out what's because there are a lot of other startups. That's one thing, we talked about private equity, and that's something people may not know a lot about. So it was interesting to kind of dive deeper there. Is there anything else that you've learned from your startup journey that's maybe you wish you would have known prior to getting into it?
I think the experience of every person is different. And I always believe in merit. So I always thought, since I was very young, my father was very much about, you work hard, it will pay off. So I always kind of had my career based on that. And every job I had, I always had a good boss that promoted me because they thought I was the first one coming in, the last one leaving. All of those things that we learn about working hard and merit. But I did learn in technology is a little bit different. I think that venture capitalists, in general, investors, they already have an idea about what works, the formula that works for them. And so we constantly have to educate them about different ways to do things. I don't think there is a general in the country understanding of the contributions of people to technology. I used to hear all the time on the amount of money given to women is very, very small, and only 2% of women get venture capital, and Hispanic women is 0.1. And I was always, I always heard that. And then, about a month ago, during Hispanic Heritage Month, I put a question on LinkedIn and I asked, do you know any tech Latino founder? I want to do a list. And people start sending me, and the conversation became awesome.
That's great.
So I was able to, I got lists from Harlem Capital, from Springboard, everywhere. Everybody sent me a list. And I compared all of those lists and I put together a list. It took me 3 weeks, and I was just really obsessed with it. And I found 275 tech founders that are Latino founders.
Wow.
And that they have raised $5.2 billion of what we know with active companies right now, $5.2 billion. And I found, 19 so far, because I'm still doing that list, of people that have exited companies that are tech Latino leaders, that they exit them for about close to $6 billion. And so these numbers do not match the narrative about Latinos are not getting money. What happens is that I think a lot of women, the disabled, LGBTQ, people of color, etc., they're hidden behind white founders, not because it's something anybody's doing deliberately. It's just because the white founder generally is the one that has access to the investor, and the investors feel more comfortable with the white founder. So the Latino founder or the color founder or the women founder, whatever, they are not really in the mix. But when you see these technology companies with funding, most of them that are ones, maybe not most of them, but the ones that I look for technology founders, Latino founders, it was a mix. It was a diverse leadership team and so founding team. So I think the biggest takeaway is that we are contributing to technology. Everyone is in massive ways. And that the U.S. continues to be the center of innovation in the world. And everybody looks at the U.S. as that, and we should feel very proud of that. And not, and the job doesn't end today. We continue. We have to validate our work every single day, not because, great things happen to us. We can kind of, live in that or glorify that. No, the work is every single day. If you have had a level of success, your job is to recognize the job of others. So my job now if I move on, I'll do something else. But it's also to recognize the work of all of those founders that I found and many others of any race, of any background, because we should be very, very proud of the work that we're doing and the resources that we're getting, because I'm not saying we don't need more, which we do, but in the process of educating investors, we should also remind them they are funding people of color. They just might not know them.
Help change the narrative. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that detail. And we'd love to share that as well. So once you get that report together, let us know how we can help get the word out, because you aren't alone. You've done an amazing job here. It's just, I think that there needs to be more amplification of the work that's being done, and obviously more of it, more help being sent towards, Latino or women of any color, as well as not just women, men of color as well. So that's what we're here all about here at Start of the Year. So I think that's a good way to wrap it. We've got some great companies here this week, and there's, they're all, very diverse backgrounds from all over the country as well. So thank you for that tip, and thank you for sharing all of your insights here. If people wanted to get in touch with you to connect in some way, where's the best way to go, or what's the best way for you?
LinkedIn, Ximena Hartsock, Hartsock. Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium. The three are the same, Ximena Hartsock, and I write in Medium a lot about when we talk about the New Citizen, and LinkedIn, I'm there chatting. So please. If anybody knows of anything that we should be highlighting, let's do it.
Thank you, Ximena. That was an amazing conversation. It's always great to hear about entrepreneurs who are working on products that serve the greater good. And we wish you the best of luck with your new endeavor as well. Can't wait to hear more about it. Well, that's this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it and you learned something new. And thanks again for listening. And remember, you can subscribe to our show pretty much wherever podcasts are offered or distributed, as well as you can review it as well and let us know your feedback. We'd love to incorporate some of that feedback into our show if we could, and appreciate all those that share their ideas. And remember, if you have a startup idea and you want to get it started today. Today is the best day to start up, not tomorrow, not the next day, because you can always iterate. So it doesn't have to be perfect today. Just get it started, get it moving, and build some momentum. Until next week, I'm Frank Gruber signing off. Stay safe and be well out there, and thank you again for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode soon.